Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and to talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Crawl, and today I'm going to be talking about identity and self-actualization, which I believe you are going to like what I have to say on because these are things that I specialize in as a personal development specialist. I've actually studied the psychological science of identity work called logotherapy. So I'm going to be approaching this from a much different perspective than most people who talk about identity these days, which I hope you will find refreshing. And first, before talking about what identity is, allow me to address what identity is not. And first and foremost, identity is not identity politics. All right. Every time I listen to people talking about identity politics, I am just shaking my head, thinking, no, this is not what identity is. And that's because they are basically just grasping at straws being handed to them, from other people with political agendas trying to tell them, here are the options of things that you can be. And another thing that identity is not is something that is assigned at birth, such as your parents' religion, or your race, or your gender. Now, this does not mean that you are not your gender, okay, or you are not your race. I am a white man. What I mean is that this is not your identity as a person, a character. Identity is something that is psychological, okay? So, I am not just a white man, understand? And again, I'm not my parents' religion. And so basically what I'm getting to here is that identity is not labels placed upon you by people who are not you, okay? You are the one who gets to say who you are. And also, identity is not narcissism, which many people have it confused with these days. Or reductionistic mantras, such as, I am a queen, or I am a woman, I know my worth. Or for men, I am a high-value alpha male. These are just narcissistic mantras that are not real identity. Identity is also not a culture that you have no association with in real-world reality, all right? Such as when black people here in America, say, I am African, and even go as far as to put on African garb and, act all proud of their heritage when they have never been to Africa and have no actual connection to African culture and don't really know hardly anything about it, don't know where in Africa they come from. Again, you're just grasping at straws. Or for a white person saying, I'm Italian or I'm Irish. Like in the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, when Mac, the main character, is, always obsessing over his Irish identity when he's never even been to Ireland, and, there's really hardly anything Irish about him, and then to fuck with him one day, his mom tells him he's not Irish, and he's actually Danish, when he's actually made a pilgrimage to Ireland at that point, and his sense of identity just starts collapsing in on him, because it wasn't a real identity. Similarly, I have an Italian friend, and I'm not Italian, but I'm like more Italian than him. I'm more involved in Italian culture than him. I'm, constantly cooking Italian. It's what I'm making for dinner tonight. I've been cooking Italian since I was young. I listen to Italian music. I tried to learn to speak Italian once. My friend, he identifies so much as being Italian, and yet he doesn't eat Italian food, doesn't speak Italian, doesn't listen to Italian music, doesn't identify with any aspect of Italian culture whatsoever, doesn't watch Italian films. He went to Italy and didn't even enjoy it or find anything he identified with the culture with there. And, I'm constantly seeing people, associating and identifying with cultures and creating this identity around it that is not even real. Another thing that identity is not is interests and preferences. These are a part of who you are, but they are not your identity. So when I hear Taylor Swift fans calling themselves Swifties and creating, this cultural identity of, being a Swiftie, identifying simply with a musical artist, that is not a real identity, okay? The same thing goes for the alternative juggalos, people who like to listen to ICP. They formed a culture, and then they formed a cultural identity called juggalos. That one is actually a much stronger identity than Swifties, but it's still not a real core identity. Something I've talked about before is that your identity is also not your job title, okay? Saying, I am this, and, inserting your job title there as if it is who you are as a person is a fallacy. You are not your job title. Your identity is also not your relationship to others. All right. Again, that is a part of who you are, how you relate to others, but your identity has to be internal. It has to do with yourself, not with other people. All right. And lastly, identity is not about labeling, just putting labels on yourself, especially excessively. I spent time in India in 2016, and I dated a Bollywood celebrity who was not only a movie star, but had a media production company, a media marketing company, and did charities and startups. And from the time I met her to, a couple years later, after I'd come back into the States and, we had still kept touch, she just was continuously adding job titles and, other roles and titles to her Facebook profile. And this is just egomania. And I see this a lot with identity politics and with just like the narcissism that is parading as identity today, where people are just, excessively labeling themselves. This is not real identity. It's egomania. All right. So now that I've cleared up all of the confusion about what identity is not, let's talk about what identity actually is. All right. First of all, identity is personal. It is not about a role you play in relation to others. Okay. So while if you have children, you are a mother or father. Okay. If you have friends, you are a friend. Right? That is not who you are at your core, okay? It's not your core identity. Your core identity does not have anything to do with other people. It only has to do with you. It is something that is highly personal and must be internally validated. Identity also is your personality type or character, however you might describe it. That is a signifier of your actual identity. Identity is also consciously chosen beliefs, okay, such as your political party or philosophy. All right, if you are a Republican or Democrat, you know you are that because you made the conscious choice to think about those things, in this case politics, and decide which ones you believed in and thus which party you belong to. All right. Identity is also your life's purpose and life's work. So this can be your career title if it reflects this. Like, for instance, being an author or a scientist who does their work because it is meaningful to them. It is part of how their mind works. It represents their values, their passions, their purpose, right? It is a part of who they are. Identity is also roles you play in the world that are meaningful to you, such as being an athlete, musician, writer, philosopher, artist, gardener, chef, whatever it may be. And, identity can be anything that is independent of others. All right. So when I'm doing identity work with someone and, I ask them to describe who they are and they start describing things that are just relations to others, such as, I am a good friend. That's not an identity. Okay. Just keep in mind, it has to be independent of other people. Are you sure to take your daily dose of red pills consistently so that you can stay out of the matrix? The red pill is a medicine that only works if you take it in the right dosage and never miss a dose. One missed dose of red pills can mean turning back into a blue-pilled limp dick simp under the sharp heel of the evil feminist matriarchy. So make sure you are subscribed and that your subscription is set to all so that you never have to miss one of your daily doses of the red pill, because I'm releasing hot new red pill content every single fucking day just to make sure you don't have to. So make sure you will actually get notified when they are released, because that YouTube doesn't want to show you things that don't align with its liberal leftist feminazi agenda, and it shadow bans content creators like me who use free speech to speak out against these politics and stand up for the rights of the oppressed masses of men like you and me. And if you want to help me keep fighting the good fight, please donate using the PayPal link below so that I can keep this work alive, because I simply cannot do it without the support of viewers like you. And be sure to spread these messages and share these videos with any other men you know who could use a nice big dose of red pills. There are some things which identity can be, but not always, and can be misleading or flimsy when you are over-focused on them and are trying to make this, your core identity. So being a part of causes can be a part of your identity. If you are a revolutionary, an anarchist, an activist, or God forbid, a feminist, yes, that is part of your identity. All right. Maybe not your core identity, though. Your hobbies. if they're meaningful, being like a boater, a racer, a swimmer, a hunter, a fisher, these are things that you are, yes, but not your core identity. Identity is also your self-image, okay? If you are a fashionista, for instance, yeah, that is part of who you are. Again, not your core identity, though. And a part of your identity can be roles you play for others, such as being a parent, right? A father or a mother. That's meaningful. But because these are about you relating to someone else, it should be built on top of your core identity. And similarly, identity, can be your sexuality in part, okay? So yeah, a gay man is a gay man. That's who he is, right? But it shouldn't be all he is, right? Similarly, in the BDSM community, being a dom or a sub, like, yes, that is your personality, but it should not be your core identity because it signifies how you relate to others, okay? So I've mentioned the word core identity multiple times, and I know you're probably wondering what that is, what it means exactly. So now I want to talk about identity psychology, and the science of which is called logotherapy, as I mentioned earlier. This comes from the famed psychiatrist Viktor E. Frankl, who created this science in the 40s. He was in a concentration camp in the Nazi Holocaust. And so he had his identity stripped away from him and was basically reduced to, being treated like a domesticated animal. And luckily he made it through the Holocaust, and resumed his practice in the field of psychology. But since he had had his identity completely broken down and destroyed by the Nazis, he had to use his knowledge of psychology to work on himself and building his sense of identity back up. So he created this field called logotherapy, or identity work, to do so. And then he wrote his first book on this, called Man's Search for Meaning, a book I highly recommend every single person in the world read if you want to have an identity that is, real and based in psychological science, at least. Then he went on to write another book called The Will to Meaning, both of which I, of course, have read. And I'm going to break down for you now the core tenets of logotherapy, or identity psychology. So the first thing you need to understand is that there is this concept called the core identity. This is who you really are, most fundamentally and essentially at your core. All right, like I said, it's something that has nothing to do with how you relate to others or the outside world. It only has to do with you, and it is, the foundational sense of your being and self. Okay, so like I said, your identity can have different parts to it. All right, you don't just have to be one thing. All right, and in fact, you may be different things in different situations and contexts. All right, but your core identity comes from three basic tenets or principles of logotherapy. The first one is the freedom of will. All right, you need to have free will to be able to think freely for yourself in order to make a independent and highly personal, conscious decision about who you are. All right, if someone doesn't have free will and free thought, they're not going to be able to do that, and they're just going to be, considering themselves whatever their parents or someone else told them that they are. All right, so the first thing is freedom of will. And then from that comes number two, which is the will to meaning. You have to use your free will in order to discover your own personal meaning. And then that leads to the third one, which is meaning of life. You have to use that will to meaning in order to uncover or create the meaning for your life. Okay, so the meaning of life is a huge part of your core identity and your life's work as well. Now, there are other things that make up your core identity, and those are values, specifically what Dr. Frankl calls your core values. Because again, we can have so many different values, right? So I value reading books. That doesn't mean that I identify as a reader, and that, when I meet someone new and they ask me about myself, I tell them, hi, I'm a reader. That's just a thing that I value, just one of the values that I have, not really a core value. All right. However, one of my core values may be writing, since I am an author, which is something that is related to the fact that I value reading. All right. So there are three core value types that Dr. Frankl outlines in his books. The first are creative values. So these are values that you have based upon things that you enjoy creating or creations you enjoy engaging with, right? So like I said, I'm an author. I enjoy cooking. I'm a musician. These are creative values of mine. The second are experiential values. These are values that are based on life experiences that you have had that have led to life lessons that have caused you to have certain values. All right, so all of the values that I am bestowing upon you in the Masculinism channel comes from my life experiences and the life lessons that I have gotten from them living as a man in this gynocentric society. And then the third and last one are attitudinal values. Attitudinal, which comes from the word attitude. And so these are values that are based on, emotions or mindsets or attitudes that you have that you value. All right, so if you value positivity, positive thinking, positive psychology, whatever, that would be an attitudinal value. Conversely, if you are a cynic, that would be an attitudinal value. So those are the three core values that contribute themselves to your core identity and your sense of who you are. And then the last thing that makes up your core identity, just like I mentioned, the meaning of life, is your life purpose, what you consider to be your life purpose. All right, and this again has to be something that you have constructed for yourself, not something that was given to you by someone else. Once you have figured out your life purpose, this really gives you an incredible sense of self and meaning, and it gives you the ability to have a meaningful and purposeful life. And meaningful, purposeful living is a huge part of logotherapy. If you want to learn more about logotherapy, identity, and purposeful living, you can do so by checking out the article that I have written on these topics below, which will teach you all of the fundamental principles that you need to know about the psychology of these things. But what you need to take away from this is that identity must come from a place of being conscious of who you really are and having actually thought about it and figured it out, and not just being what others tell you to be. And in fact, not only is your identity not something you already are, your identity is also something you have the potential to become and will be, because your identity is also your ideal self. All right, so if you have dreams of becoming something in life, that is part of your identity. And that is what is called self-actualization. So lastly, let's talk about self-actualization and what that is exactly. Self-actualization has to do with the idea of the ideal self, as I said, and becoming it. Self-actualization, as I describe it, has to do with the combination of self-acceptance and self-improvement, something that most people are not doing together. All right, most people either go in one direction towards self-acceptance or the other towards self-improvement. However, if you really want to self-actualize, you need both of those things. All right, you need to be able to accept things about yourself that you cannot change and that make you who you are, even if you do not like them and they are part of your shadow side. But you also need to be able to work on self-improvement, changing things that need changing, turning weaknesses into strengths and becoming a better person and transforming yourself into who you really want to be. And self-actualization has to do with your life purpose and your pursuits towards fulfilling your life purpose, doing your life's work and attaining your goals and achieving dreams. And it has to do with self-fulfillment. Okay, fulfilling your dreams is the biggest way that you are going to feel self-actualized. That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button. And if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix, well then, I have the perfect book for you. The Bible of Esoteric Knowledge is a super concise, dense, info-packed philosophy textbook, written in the same verse format as the Bible, but combining multiple different, highly esoteric philosophies such as Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, shamanism, ancient paganism, and a special balance between theoretical physics and metaphysics, along with some special bonus info on the cryptic secrets of sexuality and death. This book will stimulate your intellectual philosopher's mind like no other, especially since it's a lot shorter and easier to read than most philosophy books made up entirely of run-on sentences and never-ending paragraphs, and can be quite boring and exhaustive. Full of all the most fascinating mystical secrets of the universe, gratify your inner geek and quench your thirst for meaning with the Bible of Esoteric Knowledge. Get your copy at the link below for a special sale price today. Enlightenment has never been so easy.